Throughout the history of the NCAA tournament, the only thing that garners as much expectation as the NCAA National Championship is the Final Four. And this year, the Final Four has built that same level of anticipation as we've seen in the past. One could argue it has generated more. See, for the first time since 2008, we have 4 number 1 seeds being featured in the Final Four this year. That's something that you don't usually see very often. Typically, along the path throughout the throughout the NCAA tournament, something happens, whether it be a team getting upset, whether it be one of the number 1 seeds losing on a buzzer beater. It's just extremely rare that you see 4 teams who were picked as the 4 best teams in the tournament in their specific region all make it to the Final Four and out of their region. However, this year we've seen exactly that. And these games are proving to be some of the best games, with every single team having a legit shot at winning not only the Final Four game that they are in, but the entire dang championship. Now, before I get too deep in this video, I want to remind everybody to go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel. I drop videos like this all the time. I took a step outside what I usually do with NBA content, and I'm talking about March Madness, but I'm sure you like this video. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you can see more. Now, the first matchup that I would like to talk about is the matchup that I think most people are anticipating, and that is none other than the clashing of 2 of the SEC's top teams in the Florida Gators and the Auburn Tigers. Now, I think we all know the resumes of both of these teams, but for those who don't, let me just give it out to you. Florida has been playing phenomenal all season. Although they've had their struggles and some key losses throughout the regular season, they came into the tournament as the hottest team in all of basketball. They came in on a crazy winning streak and started the tournament off against Norfolk State. They proved just that. They beat Norfolk State very handedly and moved on throughout the conference to the next round, where then they would face a team like UConn. And UConn gave them a run for their money. When playing UConn, as we know, are the 2-time back-to-back defending national champions. But this roster isn't the same as before. But they do still have their head coach in Dan Hurley. And anytime you have a coach like Dan Hurley on your sideline, you're going to have a pretty good chance. And that's exactly what happened. Although Florida comes out pretty hot against UConn, takes a big lead, UConn fights back in that second half, making shot after shot, play after play, open bucket after open bucket, and they even the margin between them and Florida. However, in the end, Florida prevailed. And this seemed to be like a theme for Florida throughout the games after this. As they play Maryland next game, tie game going into halftime, then post-halftime, they outscore Maryland 47-33, prevail, and now they're in the Elite Eight. And in the Elite Eight versus Texas Tech, it looked like it was all over. They were facing a 9-point deficit versus a Texas Tech team that just came off of a huge win the round previous. And with them being up 9 with 3 minutes left to go, it didn't really seem very well for Florida. Didn't seem like they were going to be able to get out of it, but they go on an impressive 18-4 run, and they end up winning the entire game. And the big reason for this 18-4 run for them winning and just their overall success all season is none other than Walter Clayton Jr. Walter Clayton Jr. has established himself as a legit superstar in college basketball this season. He started off at Iona, but then he goes on to transfer to Florida after Rick Pitino leaves Iona to go to St. John's. Walter Clayton leaves Iona to go to Florida, and he has been phenomenal all season, particularly with his consistent late game heroics to get them out of games throughout the regular season, and this is only continuing going into the tournament. Now, as for how Florida matches up against Auburn, throughout the season, they have already matched once before, and this game actually got pretty ugly for Auburn as Florida was able to get out to a 21-point deficit. A 21-point lead. Now, although Auburn will come back and make it a closer game, Florida will still end up winning 90-81. 8 points. 8-point loss for Auburn. It's a pretty good comeback, but throughout the majority of the game, Florida dominated. And this is pretty impressive because this is what Florida does. They just dominated a lot of the major teams throughout the SEC throughout the year, and they've continued that trend throughout the early part of the tournament. However, it's a bit different once you reach tournament time because Auburn themselves are no slouch. Auburn was one of the top teams throughout the entire tournament, which is a big reason why they were the number one seed, and they got that seeding over Alabama. Auburn was the number one seed throughout the entire tournament. They've had a great run, no scares, nothing nearly as much as Florida Path had been, and they feature some of the top players in the entire NCAA on their team, with Johnny Broome and their electric freshman coming off of the bench. This, on top of the other players they have throughout their starting lineup, makes Auburn no easy team, and with the stakes being a bit different around this time, considering it's March Madness and it's the Final Four, I don't really think that Florida's going to be able to get that huge 21-point lead that dominating win that they got over Auburn before. Now, Auburn features a bunch of things as well. They have a pretty good defense that has gotten better throughout the tournament, with their best game being against Creighton. They mentioned, like I said, Johnny Broome, a great freshman off the bench, among other players. However, when it comes down to it, I think I'm going to have to take Florida, just because I believe that their offense, their multifaceted offensive attack, is going to be too much for Auburn to handle in the long run, especially with how deep they can go and how many different ways they can attack you, and with how great their defense is. Now, the next game in the Final Four is none other than Duke versus Houston, which features two very talented number one seeds once again. Now, let's just start with Duke. Duke has the best player on their team, really the best player in all of the entire NCAA on their team, and they've had the best tournament run out of any of these number one seeds. Each game Duke has played, whether it be close at one point, they always find some way to pull away, and they've been dominant in almost every single game that they have played in. Whether Cooper Flagg has that amazing game like he had versus Arizona, or you get somebody like Colin Knuppel, or just any other player on that team, they find a way to impact the game, and this Duke team is just phenomenal, not only offensively, but defensively as well. You have somebody like Cooper Flagg, who's just Cooper Flagg. He's amazing defensively. He's very well-rounded. He can do almost anything offensively. Then you have somebody like Jeremy Roach, who is a pretty good ball handler, pretty good at initiating offense. Then you have someone like Colin Knuppel, who's right next to him. This Duke attack is just so versatile, and they can beat you in a multitude of ways. However, there's no team that really matches up against them in terms of how great they are offensively on the defensive side than Houston. Houston has been known over years for being an elite top defense in the entire nation, thanks to none other than Kelvin Sampson. And it's the same thing this year. Houston features an amazing elite defense that every team that goes up against struggles against. But they've never seen somebody like Duke before. However, in years past, what Houston has struggled with is their ability on the offensive end on the floor. However, it's not the case this year. Houston's offense this year has been phenomenal, especially with them being one of the top three-point shooting teams in the entire nation. And with Houston being one of the top three-point shooting teams in the entire nation, it just makes them even more deadly, and it has made this tournament run that they have had way more dominant. Not only have they been able to suffocate defensively, as we saw with Tennessee last game, but they're also able to convert on the offensive end of the floor, as we also saw in a critical point in the game. They hit 3 critical threes versus Tennessee to put them away in the end. So with Houston having this great ever offense they've had this year makes them a bit different and not the same Houston that we have seen in the past. And going up against a team like Duke, seems like this team is probably the best suited team to play for Duke. Now, Houston has some very impressive credentials that I just mentioned. They have a suffocating defense. This is the best offense they've had in years. They can shoot the lights out from behind the three. They have 3 stars shooting over 40% from 3. Houston has been phenomenal. But Duke has just looked dominant, and every team that they have played has looked inferior to them on the court from start to finish. They just don't look like they're playing the same game as these other teams. And any team that can match this Houston defense is Duke. They can find a way. They have the depth that no one else has. They have Colin Knuppel, they have Common Mullock, they have Cooper Flagg, Jeremy Roach, Isaiah Evans, so forth and so on. This depth just allows them to attack Houston defense in multitude of ways from all over the court. Now, one thing I will say is Duke isn't very good at penetrating and getting to the rim, and that's something that Houston's going to force them to do a lot. However, somebody like Colin Knuppel and somebody like Cooper Flagg with the ball in their hands, with how great they have been this season, I'm sure they can do something to get around that. And that's why I have to pit Duke in this matchup over Houston. I love Houston, and Houston, once again, has just as good of a case to beat Duke. They could end up shutting down Cooper Flag, making everybody else in this team step up, and they're just not able to do it, and suffocate Duke like they did Tennessee and teams in the past. And they could come out on offense and be lights out from three, like we saw from Alabama a couple days ago. But honestly, I just don't see them stopping Duke and the likes of Cooper Flag. I think Duke gets by Houston, not pretty handily. I think it's a pretty close game. Might even go into overtime, but I think Duke gets past Houston and they make their way to the national championship to face Florida. However, these are just my opinions on the whole Final Four, my predictions. Duke and Florida making it to the national championship. That's just because I think they've been the best teams in the nation so far this season. And I think the team that they're going to play, they're going to beat. But once again, just my predictions. Let me know how you guys feel in the comments. If you're a Duke fan, if you're a Florida fan, if you're a Houston fan, if you're a fan of any of the teams I mentioned, let me know how you feel about their performance throughout the tournament and how good they can be in the Final Four. But that's all I have for now. And until next time, peace.